Hey everybody, let's talk about your next paper, cause and effect. So sometimes we also call this paper causal analysis. So if you ever have a professor or somebody tell you, I need you to write me a causal analysis paper, that's just a really fancy way of saying a cause effect paper. So don't let them fool you, it's all the same thing. The point of a cause effect paper is to show that you can demonstrate clear relationships between ideas or between events, typically, when you're doing cause effect. But um, when we're doing this one, the point of looking at cause effect is saying, can we understand what specific stimuli cause something? Or what happens because we choose a certain behavior or decision. And the idea is then what happens to us or what has happened to us in our previous experiences then dictates the choices, decisions, behaviors we make in the future. So that's kind of the connection is can we understand causation, what causes things to happen? Can we see relationships? Can we also predict then what may happen in the future to help us be better decision makers? So those are some of the reasons that we specifically look at cause effect. When you're writing cause effect, there's a couple of things that you want to keep in mind. First of all, for this paper, you need to make sure that you choose a topic that is appropriate for college age educated students. Okay, so please don't tell me, the effects of not cleaning my room. That is not really an appropriate topic for an educated audience. So I want you to pick something that matters. There are all kinds of current events happening out there in the world. You can look at past events. You can look at major social issues and what are the causes of those particular issues or the effects of those things. So there's lots of big ideas out there. What I don't want you to do is something really basic. So write to an educated audience who cares about bigger issues. Okay, so that's one thing to keep in mind. You also want to make sure that then the points or examples you include also speak to that educated, higher intellectual, critical thinking audience. So don't tell us things we already know. Okay. That may mean you need to do a little bit of research for this paper. That's fine. That's a good thing. I'm not going to be too particular about the citations. I do want you to at least cite the best you can, but I understand we haven't covered citations, so I'm not worried about it too much. But of course, we want to be ethical decision makers, so do the best you can to cite anything that you borrow. But make sure that you're speaking to an educated audience, so don't repeat things everybody already knows. Then you're just wasting our time as the reader, so don't do that. Okay. Another thing you want to think about for this one, I don't want you to do both. I don't want you to give me causes and effects of your topic because that becomes so broad that the paper becomes very general and abstract and you don't get into the specifics and it becomes very generic and it's not a good paper. So you can see here on the screen, I'm showing you in your brainstorming, here's what this should look like. So you're going to choose either causes or effects, not both. And then the diagram will look different depending on which side you choose. So if I'm looking at causes, I'm looking at the things that led up to my topic. Okay, so it would look more like this. If I'm choosing effects, I'm going to look at the results of my topic. So what comes afterwards. So keep in mind that it will look different depending on which side of the topic or event you decide to do. And then you can see there's a blank for a so what. Because you need to tell us, why are you telling this? Why does it matter to us as the reader? Maybe it's important to you in your life, or maybe it's important just to the general audience, but you need to have some kind of reason you're telling us this cause effect, and then the details you give us need to drive home that so what. So it needs to be something specific, and it cannot just be these are the causes or these are the effects of, and then whatever your topic is. So these are the effects of the war in Yemen. That's not a so what. Because there are these effects from the war in Yemen, What do you want us to do about it? How does that affect our lives? Any of those can be good so whats. So you need a really strong, a really clear, meaningful so what that explains to us why your topic matters and the points that you're making about those causes or effects. So a really clear, good so what. So your thesis statement needs to not only have your topic, it also needs to have whether you're discussing the causes or effects of that topic, and then your so what. So there are 3 parts to this thesis statement. All right, causes or effects, which one you're choosing, causes or effects of what, so your topic, and then what are we supposed to learn from these causes or effects. All right, so make sure you have all 3 parts of that in your thesis statement, okay, and then you'll have something really good. You'll also have to decide what your purpose is for writing this. Are you writing to inform us, or are you writing to persuade us? So are you giving reasons to persuade us that this is true, or that these are the effects, or these are the most important effects? Or are you writing to inform us, just these are some of the effects? So if my topic is the Battle of Gettysburg, some of the effects I could discuss are the number of men who died, the fact that the North won and it was kind of the turning point of the war. My third effect could be, eventually leads to the Gettysburg Address. So all of those would be effects, but really I'm just informing, I'm not really persuading you that these are the effects. On the other hand, if I wanted to say these are the 3 most important effects, I'm implying that there are others, but these are the 3 I think are the most important, and here's why. So that will look kind of different. You do not have to list your causes or effects. Don't give me all 3 in your thesis statement. That's not necessary. But what you may want to include in your introduction maybe is some background. So if you're going to tell us about the causes of a topic, maybe you need to back up even more, kind of give us big picture of your topic. What do we need to know to understand it? If I was going to talk about Gettysburg, maybe before I even talked about the causes specifically of the Battle of Gettysburg, maybe I need to back up even further in my introduction and explain a little bit about the Civil War in general. Now, remember, you're speaking to an educated audience. We understand that Abraham Lincoln was the president. You don't need to tell us that. We know who the major generals were who fought, so you don't have to tell us that. We don't need to know it was a battle between, or a war between the North and the South. Every educated person understands that. But maybe they don't know that it's from 1861 to 1865, something like that. Whatever it is that we need to know to understand your specific topic, those would be important things. Or maybe the geography of Gettysburg specifically might be important because that really factors into the battle itself. So in the introduction, give us some background, maybe back up even further. Give us a big picture of what we need to understand about your topic, then to understand your causes or your effects. Okay. In the conclusion, then you could, give us maybe if you talked about causes in the conclusion, you could give us some of the effects. But in the body of the paper, I want you to focus on one or the other. Okay. So keep that in mind. You could use the introduction to talk about causes if your body of your paper is going to talk about effects. Or if you're going to talk about causes, you could use the conclusion to then cover some of the effects. But I really want you to dig in on one side of the topic or the other in the body of the paper. Okay, so keep that in mind. There is one grammar thing I want to make sure that we talk about especially, and that is the difference between affect and effect. All right, affect, A-F-F-E-C-T, is different than effect, E-F-F-E-C-T. And you need to make sure that you use them appropriately in this paper. So you can't just willy-nilly throw them around wherever you want them. Affect, you use that when you're talking about it as a verb. So to affect change, if I want to affect change, I'm using that word as a verb, that's affect. If I'm talking about the effects of, and typically you can tell it because there's a the or an a or an and, some kind of article comes before it, then usually you need the effect kind. So the effect one is a noun, okay? So the effects of the Civil War versus I want to affect change when I'm using it as a verb, that's affect. So affect, verb, effect, noun, okay? So hopefully that clears that up. Make sure that you that you use those appropriately. All right. One other thing I want to talk about is organization. Usually you organize this chronologically, so in the order that the causes happen or the order that the effects happen. Now, sometimes, though, they kind of all happen at once. If that is the case, you could then use emphatic, where you talk about your weakest cause and finish with your strongest cause. Okay, or same thing with effects. Maybe the effects all kind of come out at the same time. If that's the case, again, you could do your weakest effect to your strongest effect. So chronological or emphatic are probably the two types of organization we're going to go with this paper. But remember, the important thing is that you have a plan to be organized. That's really the key for that. A couple of other things you want to think about, and they talk about these in the chapter, so I'm going to expect that you read the chapter so you understand these topics. But you want to make sure you understand the difference between immediate versus remote causes of an event or a topic. For this paper, I want you to discuss immediate causes, not remote causes. So keep that in mind. Also, there's a difference between causation and correlation. All right, and so you want to make sure that you're very careful that you focus on causation and not things that might just be correlation. Okay, so make sure you understand the difference between those two ideas. And then the last one is a logical flaw that is typical with this type of paper, and it is called post hoc ergo propter hoc. And you want to make sure that you don't do it. But as educated students, I think you can spend a little bit of time reading and figure out exactly what I mean by that. There are some pretty common grammar mistakes that come with this type of paper. The biggest one being that you use affect and effect correctly. Also, be very careful that you have very clear transitions in this paper so we understand that we're moving from one cause and one effect to the next, and make sure that you use those transitions to show relationships between the causes or between the effects so we understand how they together they make a whole picture. Okay, so that also helps lead into your so what. Again, your specific details for this paper should also drive home that so what. So if I'm trying to prove that this was the turning point, that the Battle of Gettysburg was because of all the effects, that it was the turning point of the war, then I need to make sure that I include details that prove my so what. So you need to focus on your so what that you provide in your thesis statement. Okay, there's some really good examples in the textbook. I'll put those page numbers up there. A couple of things, again, I'm looking for in this paper. Number one, that your topic is of value to an educated discussion. So I don't want something really basic. I don't need to know the effects of smoking. I think we all understand those. So let's pick some things that are current, relevant to your life today. So consider that it needs to be a topic appropriate for an educated audience. That you give causes or effects in a way that shows relationships. So we see how those causes or those effects work together. Okay, there's clear relationship between them. Transitions, of course, are important. Organization is important to that. So make sure that you're very purposeful in that. You have a very clear and meaningful so what, so that we understand why we care about this topic and we care about these causes or we care about these effects. So, and remember just that these are the causes or effects is not good enough. That's not a so what. Okay. And then the main ideas or topic sentences, your body paragraphs, whatever you want to call it, make sure those body paragraphs, the points you're making in there are appropriate for an educated audience. Your job here is to teach us something, not just tell us what we already know. Okay, so make sure that that's what you're doing here with this paper. All right, so you want to spend a little bit of time brainstorming. You may need to do a little bit of researching, considering a topic that you understand its place in time and what came before it or what came after it, and something that matters to the conversation. Some places to consider topics might be something in your major. If there's a specific event or a topic that's relevant to your major, or a topic that you're studying in a different class, that this might be a good place to use that. If you have questions about your topic, of course, feel free to email me. I will be happy to discuss those with you. Otherwise, I will see you all later. Happy writing. Bye.